We start this edition of Impact with reaction and fallout from President Trump's controversial decision to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The Palestinian Islamist group Hamas has urged Palestinians to abandon the peace process and called for a new intifada or uprising. The Israeli Prime Minister claims more countries are ready to follow Mr. Trump's lead and move their embassies to Jerusalem. But the decision has been condemned worldwide by countries including Saudi Arabia, Britain, France, and the world's largest Muslim majority country, Indonesia. Tom Burridge has the story.
Tension again simmering here in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Israeli soldiers confronting pockets of Palestinians, protesting after a landmark shift in US policy. In Jerusalem's Old City, where security is always tight, shops shut in the Muslim quarter reflect anger. But for many Israeli Jews, their key ally, recognizing this as their capital, long overdue.
Historic, definitely historic. We've been waiting for it for a long time. I hope it doesn't get stuck in endless bureaucracy and waivers, and the proof is always in the pudding, but we're very excited about it.
But for many Palestinians, the move disqualifies Washington as an honest broker. The noise now not about peace, but resistance. In Gaza, Hamas, the Palestinian Islamist group, called for another uprising. In Arabic, intifada, a word synonymous with more troubled times.
Tomorrow will be a day of rage and the beginning of a wider move towards an uprising, which we will call the Intifada of Jerusalem and freedom in the West Bank.
Donald Trump said he was merely recognizing a reality. Israel's Prime Minister now claiming others will follow suit.
I have no doubt that once the American embassy moves to Jerusalem, or even before, there will be a movement of many other countries' embassies to Jerusalem. The time has come.
But the international reaction so far suggests otherwise. In Istanbul, anger directed at Washington outside the US consulate last night.
All right, Mr. President, I'm going to hand
And America's allies like France also disagree. President Macron today at an airbase in Qatar. A peace deal between the Palestinians and Israelis, he says, only possible if Jerusalem has an international status.
The status of Jerusalem is a question of international security, which concerns the entire international community.
So as tensions rise, France and Britain will express their opposition directly to the Americans at a special UN Security Council meeting tomorrow. The fear that a decades-old conflict could lead to widespread violence once again. Tom Burridge, BBC News.
Well, as we've been reporting here on the programme, there have been protests in Jerusalem, Bethlehem and across the West Bank. BBC Arabic's Nida Ibrahim has been in Ramallah for us. Have a look.
So as you can see behind me, there are a bit of clashes that are happening between the Palestinian protesters and the Israeli army. You can probably see the smoke screen that's created by some Palestinian protesters by burning some tires here on the ground. The Israeli army is responding mostly with tear gas bombs, and we're hearing that many Palestinians, maybe around 10, have been taken to hospital for injuries related to tear gas mostly. This is not the only location where we are seeing protesters. Many protesters are also gathering in Bethlehem, in Hebron, in Jericho, and many other West Bank cities in which also clashes have occurred between the Israeli army and the Palestinians. Now, these protesters have came all the way from downtown Ramallah, where there was a central demonstration that called for more support from the Arab countries. We've sensed a little bit of disappointment from the Palestinians, who say we expected a reaction, a bit of probably not necessarily from the Arab leaders, but from the Arab nations who have some sort of a relationship or a strong relationship to Jerusalem. So you could sense the disappointment here, but this is just to point out that around hundreds, maybe 400 to 500 people have gathered today in Ramallah.
That was Nida Ibrahim reporting there, and it's not just there in Jerusalem and the West Bank where the protests have been taking place. There have been protests around the world following Mr. Trump's announcement. The Turkish Prime Minister said the US had pulled the pin on a bomb ready to blow in the Middle East. Other world leaders have voiced their concerns too. Let's just get a flavour of their response.
I, as the Prime Minister of Malaysia, invite all chairmen from the party, representatives, members who are here, inside and outside the hall, and wherever they are, to stand up and express our thoughts aloud, so the world can hear the voice of Muslims in Malaysia, that we strongly reject the decision to make Jerusalem the capital of Israel.
President Donald Trump.
We strongly hope that the United States, through President Trump, will withdraw its statement recognising Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Such a move would curb the growing tensions, which could potentially escalate human rights violations in Palestine.
China supports an independent state of Palestine with its own sovereign territory, in line with the 1967 border. China calls on all sides to maintain an objective and impartial position and make efforts to quickly restart talks between Israel and Palestine.
Well, that was the global reaction. For the Israeli perspective, I spoke to Dan Diker, a project director for the program to counter political warfare at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I asked him for his response to Hamas's call for a new uprising.
Well, it's unsurprising that Hamas is calling for a new intifada. They're calling for the murder of Israelis every single day, and they actually call for the murder of the PLO and Fatah, whom they throw off of buildings in Gaza. So it's unsurprising to hear the Muslim Brotherhood's Palestinian branch calling for violence against Israel, because that's their raison d'etre when they wake up in the morning, when they go to sleep at night. But when you talk about Muslim majority countries, let's remember that what President Trump is saying to the Palestinian leadership is enough of demonization of Israel in Jerusalem. Jerusalem has been Israel's capital 3 times over the last 3,000 years, and currently since 1949.
And we've heard that argument, but many people are saying that that was the final part of an agreement to a 2-state solution for a peace deal. So for him to trump all of that and go straight to that makes a lot of people say that the US is now not a neutral mediator.
Well, in fact, the United States has maintained a consulate on Agron Street for the PLO for decades, and actually has no representation in Jerusalem for Israel. So what this has done, President Trump has actually rebalanced the American diplomatic posture towards Israel in a way that I'm sure you would agree would be fair to have to be far more equal and balanced than it was in the past. But what is really important here is to understand that the fact that Jerusalem has been Israel's capital, that the Knesset is in Israel, the government is in Israel, that every Israeli, whether, by the way, Jews and even much more privately, but Muslims and Druze and Christians all understand that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And in fact, if you want to check yourself about how secure the Temple Mount is for Muslims, for tens of thousands of Muslims who pray every day, and especially on Fridays, you'll have to understand that only Israel can protect people of all 3
Sorry to interrupt you, sir, but what's happened now is security has had to be increased across the region because of this announcement. What it's caused is protests and uprisings.
Really? Has the Arab Spring over the last 7 years in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Tunisia, and Egypt been a function of the Jerusalem decision? I mean, the entire Arab Sunni world is collapsing, has nothing to do with Jerusalem.
But did it need another implosion?
No, this is not an implosion. This is an American decision by the president to keep his promises to the American people, and there are those who continue in the international community to reject any Jewish connection to the historic and eternal Jewish capital. Now, some of us have called that historically anti-Semitism.
Where does this leave the peace accord now? But where does this actually leave the peace deals now?
It actually, here, and listen very well, this actually paves the path towards a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority.
The Palestinian Authority have said on the BBC that this is now, the peace deals are dead in the water as a result.
Well, of course, they actually threatened to boycott President Trump also, but do you believe them when they say that? The reason that this leads towards a very viable peace agreement is that Israel's recognition as a Jewish state and Israel's recognition as having Jerusalem as its capital are the absolute milestones and the important postulates towards making other concessions to the Palestinian Authority to come to a peace deal with the Palestinian leadership.
That was Dan Diker speaking to me earlier. And of course, you can get much more analysis on our website. Do go to the usual place, bbc.com/news.